Good morning, Cavalier Nation. I'm Era.
And I'm Aiden, and this is Cavalier Connections, the podcast that highlights the good things and people in our county.
This episode is the third in our series for the Port Royal Museum and the celebration of Black History Month.
Caroline County, Virginia has a rich history of African American experience, from educators and leaders to farm workers, artists, and doctors.
Today, our distinguished guest is Mr. Calvin B. Taylor Sr., School Board Chair for Caroline County Public Schools. Mr. Taylor represents Port Royal and has been on the school board for how many years?
6 years.
6 years.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for joining us today. Welcome to our Cavalier Connections studio. Mr. Taylor, you have had many years in public service with an impressive list of accomplishments. Among those, you served on the Board of Supervisors for Caroline County from 1992 to 2007, and then again from 2012 to 2016. We are also impressed by your 30 years of teaching experience, as well as being the Vice Principal of Caroline Middle School. You have been commended for your tireless work in serving the people of Caroline County with numerous contributions. Serving the public is a challenging and often thankless job. What brought you to this public service and has kept you in this public service for so many years?
Well, let me just say before I start, thank you for inviting me and having me. I'm just really honored to have this opportunity to be here and to speak with you.
Thank you for coming.
Now, as far as what brought me to public service, I was at the time I decided to run for office or become a candidate, I was teaching at Madison Elementary School. I was a fifth grade teacher. The middle school was sort of overcrowded, and we were in the process of trying to get a middle school. And the Board of Supervisors at the time was saying that they recognized the need for the middle school, but interest rates were high, and it wasn't a good time to borrow money. And they were saying that if we could wait maybe a year or a couple of years or whatever and wait for the interest rates to come down and cost of construction and those kinds of things, then that would be a better time. Because I was young and I didn't want to hear that. So I said, how many children are we going to sacrifice while we wait for the interest rate to come down? What about the people who are missing out on a quality education because construction costs are high? And I said, I just feel like we have to measure what the objects are and make a decision. But I said, we need a new middle school, and we need a new middle school now. And I understand what the board was saying, because at that time I hadn't served on the board, so I really didn't know a lot about the workings. But anyway, to make a long story short, they didn't pay much attention to me, so I ran for the board, and I won. After I won, now I didn't get to middle school by myself, so I don't want to say that. But after I got on the board, I went on the board. That was my purpose, because I just knew that we needed a middle school, and not only a middle school. Teachers weren't paid what I felt they should be paid. They still are not, but it's a little better than it was then. And there were just other things that involved education that I felt we weren't doing a good job, and I wanted to do something to help that. I guess my motto is, you are either a part of the solution or you're a part of the problem. So if you're not a part of the problem, then you need to be doing something to fix the problem. And so it kind of went on from there. I got involved, and I was able to serve 20 years. And I understand the workings of the system, and I understand what the board members meant at that time. They were not bad people, and I don't want to give the impression that they didn't care, because I think they did. But they were looking at the full picture, and I guess I was centered on children and education.
Thank you for sharing that. If I may, since you're still on the board now, as far as I know, how is the situation regarding interest rates nowadays, like for potential upgrades to the school? Because I know that's an upcoming topic for many people.
Well, I'm on the school board now. I'm not on the board of supervisors. And so the way it works, the school board makes projection based on what we feel the needs are. And we get our information from the staff, the school. The board of supervisors obviously has taxing authority, so they can generate funds. So we need to go to the board of supervisors in order to get the funding that's needed to take care of a lot of the things that we want to do. Now, there are other ways, there are other funds, but the majority of the funds, when it comes to building and construction and buses and all those more expensive things, we depend on certainly the state and federal, but a lot of it comes from the local, which is the Board of Supervisors. Now, to answer your question about the taxes in the rates and so forth. I would say, and I don't want to give you misinformation because I'm not really up on all of that, but from what I can understand, it's not a bad time to borrow. Caroline has some issues from what I can understand. And I won't get into all of the specifics, but a county has a bond rating. So you can borrow money based on your bond rating. Well, we have done quite a bit of borrowing in the county, not just for schools, but for other things as well. So right now, what we're trying to do, I think what they're trying to do, is trying to get our bond rating up so that they can borrow more money to take care of some of the county needs. So it's not perfect, but it's not impossible.
Thank you for sharing.
Most of your career seems dedicated to education. Can you tell us a little bit about your teaching career? Was teaching your first choice of careers? What subjects did you teach and where did you teach at?
Believe it or not, I started thinking about teaching even as an elementary student. I liked school, did my work. Now, don't get me wrong, I had my fun too, but I enjoyed school. And I wanted to be respected. I wanted a career that people would look at me as someone who impacted the community in a positive way. And that's what I saw in teachers at that time. During that time, teachers were probably the most well educated people in the community, and they were well respected. When they spoke, people usually listened. And so I wanted that kind of scenario for my life. And so I wanted to be a teacher. And I started in elementary school, and then I moved to the middle school when they built the new middle school. I came to the middle school as an eighth grade teacher. And then I was promoted to assistant principal, which is what I did up until I retired. So I've always wanted to be a teacher. When I first graduated from college, my degree was in history and government, and there were no positions open at the high school. Plus, I was 21, so I looked like the kids. And so, there wasn't a position open. So I went to, my first job was, I guess you would say, a reform school. It was Hanover School for Boys at the time. It's now called Hanover Learning Center. And most of those students that were there had had breaks with the law. But some of them were just unfortunate. Some of them were foster students and they had had issues. So they were sent there by the court system. I went to work there and I developed a really good relationship with the kids. And I believe that if someone in public education could have gotten to those kids earlier, maybe they would not have ended up in that situation. I was saying that, if I could get into public education, if I could be a teacher, maybe I could influence students in the right direction. And I like kids. And as you can see, I like to talk. So so I just, it was just something I wanted to do. And I enjoyed it. And if I had to live my life again, I'd do it all over.
It's a very admirable and inspiring line of work, helping out those who may be less fortunate, either due to a myriad of circumstances. But thank you for doing that. You've definitely done a service to the community over there and over here.
Well, thank you.
Now, if I may ask, who or what inspired you to be a teacher in the first place? Did you have a favorite teacher when you were in school?
I did have a favorite teacher. I guess when I was in high school, I had elementary teachers too, and they were good. But the teacher I remember was Mrs. Young. Mrs. Young taught English, and she was tough, but she was funny. And she made the class fun. She made sure that you did what you needed to do. She didn't play, but at the same time, she had an attitude that made you like her. I just enjoyed being in her class. And then she was also in charge of the dramatics club, and that was my thing. We used to do plays, and I kind of enjoyed that. And Mrs. Young was kind of the head of that. And so I had her for English, and then I had her, as a student in the dramatics club doing the plays. And she was just somebody that I kind of looked up to, and I liked. Again, making me even more wanting to be a teacher. When I came there into her class, I had made up my mind by that time that this is what I was going to do. Like I say, since from elementary school, teachers looked like they had fun. They looked like they enjoyed what they were doing. Like I said, they appeared to be well respected. That's the kind of person I wanted to be.
Now, if I may ask, you said you did plays in the dramatics club. Or what was your favorite play that you did?
My favorite play was Millie The Beautiful Working Girl. When I was a senior, that was the play. It was a comedy. I can't remember the name of the person that I played. It's been a long time ago.
Mm.
That play was fun, and I made it fun. I was a pretty good actor, and you want to be popular. And I wasn't an athlete. Athletes are usually very popular. People know them and all. But I was kind of known for that. And that was what I wanted to do. And I wanted to garner a little bit of praise, and I wanted to be looked upon a little bit as someone who was going places and doing things. That gave me a little bit of notoriety, I guess you might say.
Oh,
Thank you for sharing.
very nice. I'm also in theater. I did the lights for last show, and I'm doing it for this show, Anastasia. If I may ask, what was the production like back then?
It was not nearly as it is today because we didn't have the modern equipment like yours. Now, we did have lights. Basically, that's pretty much what we had, the lighting. Now, of course, the furniture and the other things that were needed for the play, we had those things. We had people who managed that and who did that and put those things in place between different acts and so forth. But I don't think we didn't have like we have here now. We just didn't have the modern kinds of things like they had. So we kind of had to make do with what we had. But then the other thing is you can't miss what you can't measure. So we didn't really know what we didn't have because we didn't have it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
As a former vice principal of Caroline Middle School, we're sure that you've been here to witness many changes throughout the years. What are some big differences in the middle school of your day and the one we have now?
In my day, we really didn't have a middle school as the middle school is today. The grades were from first through the seventh was like elementary school, and 8 through 12 was high school. When we got to the eighth grade, the principal let us know that you're not really high school students until you get in the ninth grade, but this is the way it's done, so you're in the building. We didn't have sports like the middle school has. We didn't have a sports program. Many of the courses that are part of the middle school curriculum we did not have. It was basically academic, some math, reading, science, social studies in those classes. But we didn't have our own band. We didn't have a chorus. We didn't have barbering or cosmetology or brick masonry or technology. Those classes that are part of the middle school curriculum now, we did not have. That was the major difference. But I think even more than that, students didn't have the voice in those days that students have today. In some ways, that's good. In some ways, it may not. When I think in terms of my experience at middle school level and elementary or whatever, students have a voice and they should be heard. We should listen to them. We may not be able to do everything the way they feel it should be done, but I think it helps you to garner respect. When I was in the school system, whether I was a teacher or whether I was an administrator, my goal was to get students to respect me. And I believe that if they respected me, they would do what I asked them to do. I felt like I could reach them. And most of them I did reach. Well, of course, back during that time, just do what I tell you.
Mm.
That wasn't the practice at that time. And even when you were growing up with your parents, they didn't bargain with me. They said, this is the way it's going to be. You got to do this. When my kids came along, they got away with murder. But anyway, but they wouldn't say that, but they did. And don't get me wrong, my parents listened to me too, to a degree. But it was during that day, kids didn't have the say-so and the voice that they had today. I think that made school different. The adults made the decision. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but if you feel like you are part of the decision, you will be more likely to accept the decision. And again, it's a give and take kind of thing. This is a new day, and things have changed, and they're changing all the time. And what we have to be able to do is to adjust to the change. And those changes that may not be best, we need to find a way to deal with. But those changes that are good, we don't need to turn our heads as adults because we don't want to do that. That's my take on that.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't know how it is at the middle school right now. I know at the high school, it has few advisory groups. I'm part of 2 of them. And it has advisory groups for like students, for adults, for teachers. It has many advisory groups. So that's definitely something that's apparent here.
Well, we have a student who is on the school board. The young lady is very good. She doesn't have voting power because the state sets up that part of it. We respect her opinion quite a bit. And when we are talking about things or when we have issues, we refer to her. And what she'll do is she will talk to students at the high school regarding certain issues and certain things, and she'll bring those ideas back to us. And we will try to incorporate their thoughts and their ideas in what we do. Sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. It just all depends on the circumstance. It all depends on the situation. She is the voice of students on the school board. When I was in school, we didn't have a voice on the school board. And so I think that's a major change. But it's the time. And I think people have realized that everybody is important. Everybody's opinion counts and everybody should be heard.
I agree with that fully. I'm glad we have somebody on the school board to represent Caroline High School.
Right.
We're currently celebrating Black History Month, and as you're a lifelong educator, we're interested in how education in general has changed, specifically for Caroline County's Black community. We know that desegregation began in Virginia in 1959, but the process continued into the 1970s. We also know that the former Union High School, now a community center, was originally a school for African Americans, but was closed in 1969 when the public school system began. Are you able to share some information on what the schools were like in Caroline County over the years?
Yes, I can. I started school many years ago, but they were totally different than they are now. I started elementary school at 6 years old. We didn't have a kindergarten. We didn't have a preschool. The schools at that time for minority students were basically run by the churches. There was a group called the Sunday School Union, and the black churches in the county belonged to the Sunday School Union. And the Sunday School Union, along with other contributors, provided money for school. And so many of the churches had a school. The church that I went to, for example, was Zion Grove Church was the name of it. And our school was Zion Grove School. And it was in the community. And the students who went to that school lived in that community, and they went to that church. And there were some over 20 some schools like that around the county. The lady who was the teacher, there was no principal, there was no assistant principal, there were no guidance counselors, there were no cafeteria. You had to bring your own lunch. I lived next door to the school. That was good. It was totally different. The grades in that school were 1 through 5. Now, once a child got to the 6th grade, then they came to Bowling Green well, it's Union High. It wasn't Union High then, but so that's what they did. But 1st through the 5th grade went to those schools. And as I said, the teacher at that school was a lady named Miss Louise Norman, and she went to church. She was the clerk in our church, and she knew all the parents. She knew all the kids. If she had a problem, all she had to do was just say to me, I'm going to talk to your mama this evening. And I wouldn't say anything else for a month. She knew everybody, and everybody knew her. There was no such thing as a discipline referral. You just did what the person told you. And, nobody got suspended. Nobody got put off the bus because you just did what the person in charge says. Now, I'm not saying that we didn't have some discipline. It's because you did have that, but they were handled different. When those schools closed, and I was only there for 2 years, when I got to the 3rd grade, they built new schools. But they were still segregated schools, but they were large elementary schools. And so they closed up all those small one-room schools. And when I came there, it was a big school. As a matter of fact, Bowling Green Elementary is the same building. It's been added on to since then. But that was the building that I came to in the 3rd grade. And it was totally different. In the smaller schools, we didn't have inside restrooms. We had outside restrooms. We didn't have water. There was a pump. It was Union Elementary at that time. When I came there, it's a big new school with all new desks and new rooms. It was like I thought I had died and gone to heaven. Yeah, it was just really nice. And teachers were just nice. Like I said, we had issues like everybody else, but it worked. And over the years, it's emerged. We've watched the schools grow. I graduated from high school in 1969. That was the last year for segregated schools. Integration came totally in the fall of 1969. Prior to that, around 65, 66, they had what's known as the freedom of choice. Now, if you wanted to go, the white school was Caroline High. The black school was Union High. If you wanted to go to Caroline High, you could go. Your parents would just go and register you, and you go. And we had some students who did that. Now, and if white school students wanted to come to Union High, they could come. Now, we didn't have any that came, but we did have black students that went to the white school. And they made it okay. Some of them stayed, some of them changed their mind and came back. In the fall of '69, all of that ended. There was no choice. It was just one school. And my sister went to the ninth grade. I was in college by then. And she used to write to me, and we would talk about, I'd ask her how things were, and she said, it's okay. She says, it's okay. We get along. We have our issues. Some people just crazy. But for the most part, most people did okay. When I started teaching in the fall of '73. I had never taught a white child. I had never had a white teacher because when I went to college, I went to Virginia Union, and it was a predominantly black school. And we had a few white staff, but for the most part, they were black. When I started teaching, it was a new experience for me. I hadn't had an experience with white students, but it was fine. I mean, I just went in that room and I did what I did. I talked to the parents. I never had a parent to be disrespectful to me because I was black, or a parent to say, I don't want you to teach my child because you're black. I never had that. And as a matter of fact, and I'm not saying you didn't have some circumstances where that probably was, but I didn't deal with it. I didn't have to deal with it because my attitude was, I'm here to work with every child that comes through that door. And I don't care what color they are. I don't care whether they're male. I don't care whether they're female. I'm here to work with them. And that was my attitude. And I tried to portray that attitude with my children. And we got along fine. I will say this. When I decided to be a candidate for the Board of Supervisors, I ran in the Port Royal District. The Port Royal District was 80% white. And the guy who held that seat before me was a white guy. And he wasn't a bad guy. As a matter of fact, we became friends. He was vice president of the bank. And people told me when I decided to run, they said, you can't win in that district. The district is 80% white. All the black votes in the district won't get you there. They're not going to vote for you. And I said, people don't care who you are. The majority of them. As I said, you got fools in all races. But for the most part, people don't care what color you are. If you have a service that's going to make life better for them, they will support you. And I'm a witness because I won 5 times in that district.
Wow.
I'm serving in the same district now as a school board person. I'm elected. Folks don't even run against me. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I'm all that. I don't mean it like that. But I do try to do a good job. I try to work with the people, and I try to give them a service that they deserve. And if you do that, and if you're genuine, people can spot a phony. But if you're genuine, most people will support you.
5 times. Was that like 5 in a row? And how long are the term limits?
Terms are 4 years, and I served 20 years on the Board of Supervisors. The school board terms are 4 years, and I'm into my second term on the school board. An individual has to be for real. You don't know everything. You don't have all the answers. You can't go in and promise things that you can't deliver. And people will get upset with you about certain things. I mean, it goes with the territory. If an individual is steadfast, honest, and has character and are really genuinely concerned and want to do a good job, people will pick up on that. And that's who people want.
Thank you. Speaking of like voting and change, people in general are so resistant to change of any kind. What must it have been like for not just the students being integrated, but for black teachers to be working alongside white teachers?
As I said, integration came in the fall of '69. I started teaching in '73, so it had been about 4 years since total integration came. With the teachers, the black teachers belonged to a group called the VTA. It was the Virginia Teachers Association. The white teachers belonged to the Virginia Education Association. The first thing they did was to try to merge those two groups and just have one group, so you wouldn't have a white group versus a black group. The guy who was director of instruction was a black guy named Shelby Gus. He was really, really good. People liked him. Black folks liked him. White folks liked him. And the white person who was the head of the Education Association was a good guy. And they worked together, and they got those teachers to merge into one group. That was a big help because when they merged into one group, they worked together. They had common interests and goals. So as far as the teachers was concerned, their attitude was, we're going to do this, we're going to make it work. They passed that idea on to the students. See, students are smart. They can pick up on stuff. If they felt like we as the adults weren't getting along, then they weren't gonna get along. But if they felt like if we enforced cooperation, if we talked about working together, if we talked about being as one, and we passed that idea down to the kids, then that helped them too. That's how it was. Everybody didn't accept everything 100%, but the majority of the people did. So the few people who had a problem had to learn to deal with it.
It's lovely how it all worked out relatively smoothly.
In Caroline, it was a pretty smooth transition. Now, some places were a little different, but we were a pretty smooth transition. And even in Caroline today, the majority population is probably white. Hispanic blacks make up about 36, 38%, I think, of the county population. But we have people represented in all facets. We have school board members. As a matter of fact, we have 4 minorities on the school board. That doesn't mean that we have to do that. That just goes to show that the people in this county decided who they want to represent their district. And like I say, my district is predominantly white. But as you can see, I'm not white. Again, we try to present a picture of where we want to do the best for everybody. And everybody don't say that, but most people, that's the way they feel. Board of Supervisors, we have 2 on the Board of Supervisors now, minority. But again, we don't always agree, but we don't have racial fight. You know what I'm saying? We differ in our opinion on certain things, but for the most part, we accept each other's culture. Things have changed in this country. Lots of people from other places have come here, and they have cultures that are different from ours. And we have to learn. That's why diversity is so important. We have to learn other people's cultures and what they believe and why they are the way they are. And if you understand that about people, then you are more apt to accept their beliefs and their concerns. And if you accept them, you get along. And that's how you grow together as opposed to growing apart.
Agreed.
It's great that we're all really accepting of each other.
Right.
Speaking of, education is such a huge part of your life. What school and community partnerships resonate with you? Can you describe a school and community partnership experience you'd like to see in the future?
Well, as I said, when I first started school as a child, the churches were the ones who were sponsored the school. But of course, with the separation of church and state, you have to be real careful about how you get into the religion and that. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very religious. I have deep conviction, but they are my convictions. I can't impose them on you. You may feel the same way I do, or you may feel differently, but you have to have the right to do that. The partnerships have changed, if that makes sense. I think nowadays we have to have partnerships with the business community. We need to have strong partnerships with the workforce because we have to prepare students to be able to make a living. Whether you're going to college, I'd like to see every kid go to college. But everybody don't want to go to college. And every person isn't interested. That doesn't mean you can't be successful or that you won't be successful. All right? But if we have a partnership with the business community, we know what skills the businesses are looking for, the job market. We know what skills a student needs to be successful in the job market. And if we can teach those skills, if we can make you marketable, if you will, when you graduate, whether you go to college or whether you go to a trade school or you choose the military or whether you just go out and get a job, we need to make sure that when you walk out these doors, you can be on a path that will be able to take care of yourself. Because I'm telling you now, decisions that you make now are going to affect you 40 years from now. The decisions that you make now are going to determine what type of job you have. And that's going to determine how much money you make. And that's going to determine what kind of house you live in, the clothes you wear, the car you drive, the food you eat. It's going to determine the lifestyle of your children. So we have to make sure that we are preparing students so that when they leave these doors, if they choose to go to college, that's great. We want them to be prepared. But if they choose not to go to college, whichever route they take, we have to make sure that you are prepared so that you can make a living. That way you don't have to sell drugs. That way you don't have to do illegal things because you don't have any money. That's kind of my take on that.
I'd hope to see everybody in this school making a really good living. especially some of the classmates that I know. Booker T. Washington, educator and great orator, once said, "It is the smaller, the petty things in life that divide people. It is the great tasks that bring men together." You have spent a career educating and servicing others, helping to bring people together for a myriad of reasons. Do you have a favorite quote or passage that you live by and that you can share with us?
I think I might have said it before. You're either a part of the solution or you're a part of the problem. And I feel like that's kind of one of my mottos because if you can't fix the problem, then you need to find somebody else who can fix it because the problem is not going to go away. I also say, I got this off television, don't tell me what you can't do, tell me what you can do. If I know what you can do, then I can build on that. And I guess the other thing is, and then you said one, I think I said three. But anyway, the other thing is, I want the world to be a better place when I'm gone than it was when I came. And that won't happen unless you can impact change. That won't happen if you can't do things to address the issues of society. That's what I try to do. That's what I serve. It's not a lot of money in it, not any money, but the money that I get comes with satisfaction, comes with being able to look in the mirror and say, I had an opportunity and I impacted that change.
It's a very admirable quality you have.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We know we have taken up some of your valuable time today, so we'll wrap things up. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for your time and insight on Cavalier Connection today, and for your inspiring words and generosity of time that you can afford to us and our community. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us today.
You have been listening to Cavalier Connections, a production of the Cavalier Nation News produced by Mass Media and Innovation at Caroline High School.
I'm Ara, signing off for today.
And I'm Aiden, and we'll make more connections next time.